out of here as you read the story of Jonah is that God is a God of second chances. That God is really a God of second chances. And it doesn't matter if you're a spiritual elite like Jonah. You need a second chance. Or if you're the worst of the worst, the chief of sinners like the Ninevites. Most of us, we're not Hitler. We're not ISIS, but we're not Benny Hinn. We're not T.D. Jakes. We're not the spiritual elites that are like moving and grooving for the kingdom of God like Jonah. But we're not going around killing and murdering and torturing people either. But what God is showing us a picture of is just the beauty of His grace and His ability to continue to give you a second chance. That no matter what you've done, no matter what you did yesterday, no matter how far up you feel like you are with God and fell. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just might have been having that great month, that great week, that great day. You know what I'm saying? Where you're like in the spirit, and then you fall. And sometimes you feel like, okay, God, I don't even know where to go from here. Sometimes it feels like the higher we get with God, when we fall from that platform, the harder it is to continue. And some of us, we could just be in such sin that you're just like, God, I don't know if you're going to continue to give me a second chance. And that's the beauty of God's grace, is that He's a God of second chances. He gave Jonah a second chance. He gave the Ninevites a second chance. And He wants to give us a second chance. He's the God of second chances. And oftentimes, when we feel like we blow it the most, and we go into our prayer closet, and we ask God to forgive us, a lot of times we don't feel the forgiveness, and we don't receive forgiveness because we're like Jonah. We haven't learned to forgive. You see, the Bible tells us very clearly, and Jesus says this. He says, if you don't forgive other people their sin, then I can't forgive you. I mean, it's almost like a cornerstone of the Christian faith, forgiveness, right? And one of the things that Jonah didn't understand is that he needed to give the same grace he wanted to receive to others. Oftentimes when we want the grace of God operating in our lives, where we make mistakes, we go into our prayer closet and we're like, oh God, I need your grace. But as soon as somebody wrongs us, as soon as somebody does something against us, as soon as somebody hurts us, then all of a sudden we want to treat them with the law. Right? We want to judge them, we want to bash them, and we don't want to forgive them. And oftentimes we don't realize that we don't even ask God for forgiveness, and we don't know how to forgive other people because we don't forgive sin, we excuse it. There is a difference between forgiveness, forgiving sin, and excusing it. You see, when you forgive somebody of sin, you look at that thing and you see how it hurts you. And it becomes extremely hurtful. And you look at that and you say, I'm going to make an active choice to forgive. I know what you did. I know you hurt me. I know you made a mistake. And I'm going to make the active choice to forgive you. I'm not going to hold this against you. I'm not going to, we have this way sometimes of being passive-aggressive, of slowly but surely like saying, this is how I'm going to punish you for the sin that you did against me. You see, what we do is we excuse people. People do something against us, and we always, it's okay. It's not a big deal. Maybe it's not really their fault. Or we start to make excuses for people, and we never really exercise and practice the muscle of forgiveness because we give them a cop-out. We say, and we want people to excuse us, and we never take ownership of our sin. We never take ownership of our mistakes. So when we go into our prayer closet, what we're thinking God is doing is He's excusing us. And the problem with excusing sin is that it builds up over time, right? Because it's only a matter of time before you get to that place where it's too much. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like excuse after excuse after excuse. Eventually, what do you say? This is enough. This is too much. I can't handle any more of your excuses. It's because you never really learned to forgive. You just kind of built this relationship based on excuses where you're releasing them and you're not really holding them accountable. And when we go into our prayer closet and we ask God to forgive us, what we're really asking God is to excuse us. We're asking God and we're saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Could you overlook this? But God doesn't excuse sin, He forgives it. He looks at our sin in our life and He calls it utterly sinful. Right? He doesn't just say, oh, you didn't mean to do that, or maybe you did that by mistake, or maybe this is like a hereditary thing. No, He's like, this is wrong. But he makes that active decision to forgive us. But we don't do that with other people. We don't know how to give the same grace we're asking God for. And oftentimes we don't experience the power of forgiveness in our life. That's why when we go into our prayer closet, when Jesus says, if you don't forgive other people, I'm not going to forgive you, what do you think that looks like? Let me tell you what I think it looks like to me. You never experience the freedom of forgiveness. You never experience the release of forgiveness. What I mean by that is you go into your prayer closet and you ask for forgiveness for the same sin over and over again. Because you think God is excusing you, and you got to continue to ask him over and over again, can you just please excuse this? Like, I didn't really mean to do it. Because if you believed in the forgiveness of sin and that he had forgiven you, you wouldn't have to ask again. And if you experienced the release of forgiveness, it wouldn't hold on to you. And if you experienced the release of forgiveness, you understood how heavy that sin was to God. You understood how hard it was for him to hang on that cross and to forgive you. And then when somebody wrongs you, it's very easy to transfer the same grace you received and to give it to somebody else. We don't know how to forgive because we don't even know how to receive forgiveness, because we think we're asking God to excuse us. And we're excusing other people. And that's the problem with Jonah, man. Jonah does not see how bad his sin was to disobey and to run away from God and to be this racist attitude to say these people don't deserve God. Can't experience the power of forgiveness. I remember, for me, experiencing the freedom of forgiveness. You don't even realize it till months later. And I think I've told you guys the story of when my mom was stabbed by my dad, and it was at a wedding, and it was, in public. And I remember getting the phone call from the family members that were telling us, hey, your mom's going to the hospital. She's been stabbed. She's been stabbed by your dad. And it was clear. And me and my brother get into the car, and we're driving, and as clear as day, guys, I told him, we have to forgive him now. We got to release him right now, because if we don't, the bitterness, the anger, the resentment is going to build up. And I made a decision at that moment. I said, okay, I'm going to forgive him now. I had no idea what was going to happen to my mom. She could have died. Thank God she didn't, but that was a possibility. But I made that active decision to say, you know what, I'm going to forgive him right now. And months later, he's calling me from prison, and we're on the phone. And I'm talking to him. And me and my dad, we were never the people that used to say, like, I love you all the time. Like, I don't think, up until that point, I don't ever remember telling him I loved him or him telling me he loved me. And I was the first one to tell him. I was like, Dad, I love you. It was so foreign to him, he didn't even know how to say it back. He was like, I love you too. And I knew the power and the release of forgiveness in that moment, when I could love him even more after what he did than before of what he did. That's the power of release of, like, you don't hold this resentment and this anger and this bitterness, because you learn to forgive. You got to practice that, because we go into our prayer closet and we say, God, forgive me. I fail you over and over and over again. And God looks at us and says, okay, I forgive you. But somebody hurts us or does something against us, and the first thing we say is like, no, you don't deserve it. Like we did. Like Jonah did, and the Ninevites didn't. We got to learn to give the same grace we want to receive. We got to learn to do that. If you don't, you won't experience the power of forgiveness, the release, the freedom of forgiveness. Jesus is very clear. He says, if you don't forgive other people of their sin against, I can't forgive you, because you can't receive what you're not willing to give.